So who out there is a fan of leather fragrances? It is finally leather weather, and I like to pull some of these great leather fragrances and wear during the months that are cold or colder. It's actually getting cooler and cooler here, which I'm excited about. My favorite season is here, fall, and I like to wear these fragrances today. 11 total leather fragrances that are perfectly appropriate for leather weather, fall and winter. So if you're curious to learn about these 11 leather fragrances, then please stay tuned. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Sebastian with Smelling Great Fragrance Reviews. Today it's all about leather. Are you a fan of leather? Let me know what your favorite leather fragrance is before you continue watching this video, because, you know, as I said, I have 11 leather fragrances here. Some of these fragrances are the usual suspects. Some of them are newish ones for me. So I thought I'd go ahead and do this, video for you guys to find out about the leather weather fragrances. Before I get to the fragrances though, if this is your first time tuning into my channel and you still haven't subscribed to my channel, please do click the subscribe button below and also click the bell so that you'll be notified for future videos and giveaways. I do want to mention that there are several leather themed videos on the channel, so please click some of the links I have below so you can watch and find out. I have one that's specifically about how they make the smell of leather and fragrances, and it's pretty interesting, very creative thing that they do in perfumery, so go check that video out. But today, as I said, it's leather weather fragrances, and I've got 11 of them for you today. And I'm going to start off with one that I have recently picked up that I want to explore. A particular house that I didn't really dismiss. I had favorites from this house, but I kind of like shoved them in the back. But now I'm kind of getting curious and excited about this house slowly, and I'm enjoying a lot of their fragrances. The first fragrance I'm going to talk to you about is Black Saffron from the house of BYREDO, and this is the house that I said I kind of shoved in the back a little bit, as I do have my favorites here from this house: Accord Oud, Bal d'Afrique, and Pulp. But this one actually was one that I really came back to over and over again, and now I have it. It's a great scent, but you know, I bought it mostly because I'm going to be exploring some saffron in fragrances, but in the end it's a leather. And I've mentioned in my videos quite frequently that for me, saffron as an aromatic note tends to go leathery, and this is definitely a leather, even though it's called Black Saffron. In the end, it does remind of Tuscan leather a little bit, but those of you that think Tuscan leather is just overpowering and intense might want to check into this, because I feel like this is a lot easier to wear, even though it smells and reminds me of Tuscan leather. I think it's a lot easier to wear. For me, BYREDO fragrances tend to be on the lighter side. They're not like intensely beefy and dense. They don't have a lot of depth. They seem a little more clearer, a little more transparent. Like when you're wearing the fragrance, you can actually see through the notes, rather than it's so dense and thick that you can't really see through the notes, depending on the type of fragrances. That's what I feel like BYREDO. They tend to be on the lighter side, but I'm kind of going towards the lighter fragrances a little bit, and since this house has so many different styles, I kind of want to explore them and see what they've done with a lot of their fragrances. This one features raspberry, leather, saffron, juniper, cashmere, violet, vetiver, and grapefruit. When you smell it, it's quite fruity. The raspberry, leather, and saffron are basically what's running the show here. And the raspberry, of course, is prominent in Tuscan leather as well. But for me, it's the reverse. There's more raspberry here with leather and saffron. With Tuscan leather, there's more leather and saffron, I think, with raspberry. So it's just a little fruitier take on that style of leather fragrance, but I really enjoy it. I feel like this is really appropriate for fall days. Even if it's warm outside, I feel like because it's fruity, it's definitely going to satisfy. It's leather in the end, it's saffron in the end, and it's definitely a fruity raspberry in the end. Such a great release. I really love it. If you're choking on Tuscan leather, definitely give BYREDO's Black Saffron a try. So I recommend this, as I said, all year round. I'm going to tell you what season it's appropriate for. If it's a fall, if it's more appropriate for fall, if it's more appropriate for winter. I feel like this is definitely more appropriate for fall, but you can wear it any time of the year. There's really no rule. For me, I wear fragrances any time of the year. If I want to smell citruses in the really cold of winter, I will do it. But if I want you know, something that lasts a long time, I will pull for the more darker scents for, you know, the winter days. But that is definitely BYREDO's Black Saffron. Moving on to a Tom Ford fragrance, and this is Ombre Leather. So this one actually is the anti-Tuscan leather, but I feel like in the end, are they similar? Not really. There's a slight fruity touch in here, very, very light. It doesn't come in as much. But for me, Tom Ford's Ombre Leather reminds me of fabric, the smell of fabric. When you work with clothing, material, manufacturing plants, a material where you're gonna, you know, sew pieces of clothing together. It reminds me of the smell of those, you know, piles of fabric. My parents were clothing designers, so they I got used to the smell. And my uncle was a shoemaker, shoe designer. So both of the leather and the fabric together, it combined is what I get with this one, which actually is really, really great because in the end, it's a leather, but it's a fabricy leather. There's some slight fruity touches here. There's some you know, floral touches of jasmine, Oakmoss, Cardamom, and Patchouli. In the end, I prefer Ombre Leather over Tuscan Leather. It's just Tuscan Leather can go really manufacturing plant, industrial smelling, even though it's a leather with the light raspberry touches. Here, it's a little more wearable, and in the end, it's still stronger than Black Saffron to me, but it's a great, great designer fragrance. This, to me, I feel like is definitely fall appropriate, cooler fall days, and definitely cold winter days. So that's Tom Ford's Ombre Leather. Now that fragrance is not part of the private blend collection fragrances, so it's easier to get, but still on the pricier side. Next is a fragrance from the house of Molton Brown. It's Russian Leather. So here we have, this is the older bottle, by the way. They have now updated bottles, so it doesn't look like this anymore, so you look for a video tomorrow. In fact, I'm doing a video on Molton Brown's Milk Musk. Check that video out tomorrow. But Russian Leather for me is a great fall appropriate leather fragrance because it's a very, very aromatic leather experience. When I say fall appropriate, you can wear it when it's warmer outside. I find it to be perfect because it smells of not only leather, but it also smells of aromatic herbs and leaves and things like that. In the end, it kind of reminds me of a Vetiver leather. So there's leather here, Birchwood, which adds some smokiness. There is tea, tobacco, Elemi, resin, pine, juniper, and vetiver, but I feel like the vetiver is pretty prominent, and it starts reminding me of a smoky, leathery vetiver fragrance with, you know, some grassy touches. I shouldn't say aromatic, but there are some aromatic touches in here, but I get some grassy touches as well, probably from tobacco leaves and also from vetiver. It's not an overly dense fragrance, and this is the eau de toilette. They now have an eau de parfum of it too, which I'm curious to try. Sadly, we don't have a Molton Brown store here, so I have to, you know, blind buy everything, but it's a great scent. That's perfect for fall if you like the idea of wearing leather. And in the end, it's called Russian Leather. There are so many fragrances that are called Russian Leather. And this one, you know, it's a great scent. I love the way it smells, and it works perfect for fall days. When it's not overly cold outside, you still have some warmth, but, you know, in the end of the day, at night, it gets cool out because, you know, it's not summer anymore. So that's Molton Brown's Russian Leather. Do check that one out. I feel like it's a great one. And if you've sampled the eau de parfum version of that, let me know how it is if you've compared it to the eau de toilette, because I'd like to find out. Are there any gourmand lovers out there that also enjoys the smell of leather or suede? In this case, it's a suede, but YSL has a fragrance called Sleek Suede, which is this right here, and is a fantastic smelling, gourmand smelling leather, suede leather fragrance. With this one, there's cocoa butter, so it's a very chocolatey fragrance, but it's nicely meshed and you know, mixed with suede leather. For me, suede, as I was saying earlier with my uncle doing shoe design or shoe designer is basically what he was. He was always making shoes, and he had piles of leather. The leather was always smelling a little animalic, a little stinky, but the suede didn't smell as bad. It also had a very buttery texture to it. And so here, the wearing experience is buttery. So the suede leather has a very smooth texture. So in combination with the cocoa butter, it's a very buttery experience. Add also oud here, patchouli, incense, vanilla, tobacco, and woody notes. Man, this is a great scent. If you like the idea of, as I said, the chocolatey touches and the buttery suede touches, this is a great scent, and it's perfect for fall and winter, I think. So you can wear this all fall and winter because it is slightly dark, but it has those sweet touches of the cocoa butter, so it has a gourmandy touch. But in the end, it's very Middle Eastern style of fragrance. So it's got those kind of like Middle Eastern touches of the ouds and saffron-y kind of touches here. But what a delicious fragrance. I get the combination perfectly. It's a nice leather, suede leather. It's not animalic overly, but it has like minute little touches of you know, animalicness from the suede or the leather, but in the end it's a beautifully butter, silky smooth cocoa butter mixed with the suede. Very fantastic fragrance. It's cozy, it's comfortable, but in the end it's a suede leather. So if you like this idea, do check this one out. It's delicious. It's really delicious because it's got a big chunk of cocoa butter thrown in with the suede, and it works fantastically. So that's YSL, or Yves Saint Laurent Sleek Suede. It's from the collection called Le Vestiaire, the YSL, I think is what it's called, but a great scent. Next we're going to a fragrance that I think is more appropriate for winter. We're going to the house of Papillon Perfumery. This is Anubis right here. So this one happens to be an intensely dark, very animalic, charred, buttery leather. Does that all make sense to you guys? So it is a suede leather after all, but there's so many smoky touches in here that it smells of a buttery leather with that's charred. Basically, I don't want to have you visualize this, but imagine if an animal was burning, the kind of animal that you would make leather from, and it's kind of graphic, but that's kind of what I'm visualizing. It's like smoky leather or burned or charred leather with lots of smoky touches. It's a very smoky fragrance. It's dry, it's resinous, but there's a buttery touch under there because that suede is kind of buttery and smooth. So the whole combination is great, but it is animalic, it's intense, it's overly intense. It's just an overly intense experience for a very animalic leather fragrance. What does it here is the resin notes. There's myrrh here, which has slight sweet touches, and olibanum, which is more like frankincense, which is smoky as well. So the combination of those notes with saffron, that's aromatic, and then the Immortelle here, there's an Immortelle note, which is the everlasting flower. It's a dry flower, so it is a very dry experience, but as I said, that suede comes in and gives it a very buttery touch, but an overall smoky experience. So that's Papillon Perfumery's Anubis. If you don't know this one, check it out. I have a full video of this house. Actually, I'm sampling 4 other fragrances. You can go find out more about Papillon Perfumery if you don't know about them. So as I said, I'm trying to tell you which fragrance is appropriate which season. Of course, we're dealing with fall and winter. It is leather weather after all. And here's a fragrance that I have from the house of Atelier des Ors called CUIR Sacre, which is another one that focuses on vetiver with leather, but there's also incense here, there's cardamom, there's cypress, saffron, cedar, and juniper. So it's aromatic and woody, but also resinous and leathery. This is it right here, CUIR Sacre from the house of Atelier des Ors. So in the end, if you like it dry and earthy with the woody touches of the damp woody touches of the vetiver mixed with the leather. The leather is animalic. It does kind of smell a little bit like the leather in Tuscan leather, but it's brightened up with the cardamom note. Then there's smoke added to it from incense. But in the end, it's a great scent. It's very dark. I feel like this is more appropriate for darker days, cooler days, because it is a darker take on leather. There's no sweet touches here. At least there's not a lot, because vetiver, leather, all dark notes, incense, dark notes. The woods can be a little bit dark also, but then the spices of cardamom, saffron adds a little bit of brightness to the experience, so it's not overly leaning one side, if that makes sense. But a great scent. It's very woody. It's very smoky. It's slightly animalic and also earthy from the vetiver. So that's CUIR Sacre from the house of Atelier des Ors. If you don't know that one, do check it out. It's great if you like the darker, slightly animalic leaning leather fragrances. So this next one I feel like is more appropriate for fall because the notes in here are, to me, scream fall. It's just the way it wears. It's a leather fragrance called Rose and Queer from the house of Frederic Malle. This is it right here. And with the rose here, they're not using actual roses. They're using geranium, and geranium creates a rose accord. So if you like the idea of geranium and the idea of how geranium smells and what kind of a rose accord it creates, you might want to check this one out, because in the end it's a leather with roses, but the roses are created, the smell of rose comes from the geranium note. So it's a very, very aromatic experience. It's very green, it's grassy. No, there's a little bit of vetiver in here, but there's also some light lemony touches from Sichuan pepper and very, very minute fruitiness from blackcurrant. But a great fall fragrance. I feel like it works great. It's a long-lasting fragrance. Definitely a rose that leans more masculine, because especially it's the fact that they're making the rose smell from the geranium. And I love the idea of geranium. I've always loved geranium, but I never cared for their other geranium fragrance, Geranium Peau Monsieur, because it's a very minty geranium. The interesting thing about geranium is, I'm going to segue here, geranium can go minty and also rosy. So with that particular fragrance, it goes minty, and I don't care for that fragrance. It just smells a little bit of toothpaste. Here, it goes rosy. So it's very, very interesting, these notes, that what they do with them and how they create these fragrances to go into those different directions. And I like this one a lot. It's just a very grassy, green, twiggy, earthy kind of a smell of green roses with leather. It dries down to a leather, so in the end it dries down to leather, but you're starting out very, very green and aromatic. So that's Frederic Malle's Rose and Queer. Check it out if you don't know it. I highly recommend it. Well, I do want to warn you with that one, it was not a love at first sniff. It grew on me though. I kept coming back to it. This next one is from the house of PENHALIGON'S. It's Halfeti Leather. So here we have a aromatic, spicy, fruity take on Halfeti with leather. So it's a different Halfeti. Halfeti is their oud and rose that's very, very popular from PENHALIGON'S. So of course what they've done is made flankers. Now this is the leather one, and I think they now have a cedar flanker as well. But this one, in the end, it's a great take on leather that's very, very aromatic and spicy with fruity nuances and smoky touches as well. In the end, they do have oud in here, because the oud is carried over from the previous version, whereas the first Halfeti went rosy. This one doesn't go too rosy, even though it has a little bit of rose featured in the notes. It's more about the cardamom, the incense, and the plums. A great take on leather, which is definitely different from all of these. And I feel like this one is very, very appropriate for like late fall and winter wear, because it definitely is a little more intense, but I feel like the plumminess and the light touches of the citruses and jasmine and rose make it actually a little more not so intense for the cold of the winter, if that makes sense. So that's PENHALIGON'S Halfeti Leather. If you don't know it, do check it out. I do recommend that one, and I love the brand anyway. It's a great, great house. So 3 more leather weather fragrances left. This next one's from the house of ANUBIS. This is Modern Leather. Here we have the perfect fall scent that goes into the leathery direction. So this one actually is very aromatic and herbal, but in the end it's got lots of leather. There's basil, there's oak moss, clary sage, geranium, and patchouli. So in the end it's a green, woody, earthy, aromatic experience. The leather the leather comes in, but it settles to a leather, but upon initial spray you're dealing with lots of herbs. So it's a very, very herbal aromatic experience, and that's why I recommend this one more appropriately for fall. In fact, right now it's in the 70s, 60s, 70s, mid 70s here in San Francisco, and this one's been smelling great on me, because as soon as you spray it, it gets greener and greener and more grassy, earthy, herbal smelling, and I love it. And of course it settles down to that leather that the fragrance is named after, Modern Leather. Sadly, I think these fragrances are coming and going too fast. This one, the Tobacco Reserve. In fact, the Tobacco Reserve for me, I enjoy a little more than this as a fragrance, because I like the sweetness in that one. This one doesn't have too much sweetness in it, but it's definitely on the aromatic and green herbal side. So if you like that kind of a smell, definitely check out Modern Leather. I'm not sure how much longer this fragrance will be around, but it's definitely a great aromatic leather fragrance for any man to enjoy. So that's Modern Leather from the house of ANUBIS. So this next one is one from a house called Olfactive Studio, and this is Chambre Noire, this one right here, in the new bottle. as you can see. So Chambre Noir was a fragrance that I first bought from a store here in San Francisco called Gumps, which is no longer, sadly. Gumps was a store that had all these great expensive gift items, and they always carried like a niche house or 2 or 3 or 4. And I bought my bottle, the first one there. That bottle is no longer, so this is their newer bottle. But this one is a very smoky leather with plums. Again, we have plums twice in this video. So leather, plums, incense, sandalwood, patchouli, violet, papyrus, vanilla, and pink pepper. So in the end, it's very spicy. It's woody and earthy for me, but it's a dark leather, not a lot of sweetness in here. The plums are not overly ripe or overly juicy or overly citrusy, but not citrusy, but sweet. But they add a slight bit of sweetness to the fragrance. Otherwise, it leans very, very dark and one-sided, if that makes sense. So I like my fragrances to have balance. Of course, I'm a Virgo Libra cusp-born person, and I like balance a lot. And so this one actually does have enough balance, but it leans a little more dark, definitely masculine, definitely a darker experience, a very leathery, woody, kind of a darker take on leather fragrance. So if you like your fragrances to be smoky, dark, you know, experiences, woody experiences, then this one's definitely for you. And I would advise you with this one. Of course, there's no rules once again, but I feel like this is more appropriate to wear when it's really cold outside because of fragrance. It does sweeten up on you. Don't think that I'm saying that it's not sweet. It does sweeten up because once it hits your skin, it sweetens up, and the plums do develop and ripen a little bit on your body chemistry. But overall, I feel like the fragrance is definitely on the darker side, and it's a darker take on leather. I mean, in the end, the name is Chambre Noir. It means dark room. The fragrance is inspired by photography. So what do they do in the dark room in the old days? They develop pictures. I've done it. I used to do it all the time. And so it was a given for me to, you know, get this one, and it actually is a great dark leather fragrance. So this is Olfactive Studios Chambre Noir. Check it out if you don't know it. And I'm going to end the video with one of the more popular leather fragrances in the community. It's African leather. This one I feel like is appropriate for fall. It's definitely screams fall with the notes in here because it's not overly intense, but it does have depth to it. It does have intensity. You can carry it over to the winter, don't get me wrong. Again, there's no rules with these, but I feel like this is a perfect leather weather fragrance for fall or autumn. So this one is featuring lots of spices: cardamom, leather, saffron, cumin, vetiver, patchouli, geranium, oud, bergamot, and musk. Almost like you're in Africa. Maybe you've gone to a hunting expedition, which I don't do myself, but of course people do that, and you're kind of like hitting the spice bazaar there, and there's lots of spices and, you know, herbs and things like that, and of course there's some animals around, and you can smell both the leatheriness from the animals and lots of spices everywhere. In the end, this is a cardamom bomb for me with light hints of cumin, light hints of saffron. Of course, it's very leathery. It dries down to a leather. And if you don't know leather fragrances from Memo Paris, I do have a full video on their leathers up until a certain point, obviously. I did it with Dahlia. Go find out more about their leather fragrances. A lot of their fragrances start out smelling different, and they dry down to leather. And they have many different leather fragrances. And I feel like probably the house is known for their leathers, but this is probably one of their most popular in this collection. I do have other favorites as well, but this one definitely is one that I would recommend to wear in the fall. So that's African leather, and that wraps up my 11 leather weather fragrances video. Let me know if you're fans of these fragrances, and also let me know what you like to wear in the fall, winter when it comes to leather. Do you have another favorite that I should check out that I've never spoken about? Please let me know. Put some comments down so I can find out. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching today. Hope everyone's doing great. Appreciate you coming back, tuning into the channel every day. Stay tuned for more videos tomorrow. As I said, I have a video on Milk Musk tomorrow from the House of Molton Brown in their new bottle. Of course, this is the older bottle for Molton Brown. This is Russian leather. Thanks so much for watching today. Please like this video. Please share it. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye.